I'm Maya Renee Castro, and I'll be leading this discussion. Um, just go ahead and state your stage name and what you do.
So my stage name is Selena. I am a stripper primarily, which is a little difficult because now all the clubs are closed, at least in New York. But that is mainly what I do.
Cool. How did you get started in stripping? Tell us
Well,
your story.
I definitely needed extra money for school. I'm finishing up my undergrad, actually. So I thought that was the most viable way for me to begin. And also it was quick money, and it helped me in a time that I really needed a lot of help. And then I just continued because the schedule was very flexible um, for my personal schedule, which it has been a little difficult lately.
Okay. How was stripping before COVID hit?
It was, I mean, I guess like the regular thing. There was nothing no changes like lately. So what happened with me personally is that I actually took off a week before I guess everything started closing because I had a trip planned, and while I was away everything started to shut down. So I was not working when the whole transition thing was going on, but I do know from my fellow coworkers that it was a period of everyone thinking that we were going to return within like a few weeks or so, but we had no idea what was actually going to happen.
And when COVID started to hit, what were some of the fears that you had for your employment, honestly?
Well, that is my it is my my primary source of employment. I also do help out my family. My family depends on this income, so I was very concerned, even while I was away, of what was going to happen, especially when it started to turn into a very um, like there's no telling when we're going to return to work. Um, I think I think that, which is why I'm sure this is probably going to be one of your follow-up questions, but it's like one of the reasons why other people, um, or like all of us started to like kind of like try to find other ways of making income. Like OnlyFans is really big right now, and the reason for that is because so many clubs are closed. OnlyFans was a thing before, but I mean personally, it did not get so big until COVID happened.
Yeah, I work as a nanny, and most of my payment doesn't get recorded tax wise. So I don't know, that's something I want to admit on this, but I was also kind of scared in the sense that this is not the type of job I can ask for time off or sick leave or it's a different type of way to go about asking for to get paid still and to support yourself. And even though our jobs are very different, I had a feeling that was it kind of the same way for you? Is that something I don't know, is there a union? What is the situation for that, I guess?
Of course, I totally, that was one of the first things that I thought about when all of this was going down, because there was no safety net for me. I mean, I also do not fill out taxes for this, but I could as a private contractor, which is what a lot of people do. I personally do not, because I am in school and it benefits me not to do that. But I was very lucky that the club where I work actually made a Venmo account for all the girls, and customers who wanted to help out would send money, and then they split all of that evenly among all the girls in the club. And I don't really know if any other places did anything like this. This was like definitely very helpful. It was a very, very good thing for them to do. So I was lucky for that. It was definitely like a lot more money than I thought. I was very surprised by the amount of money that I received. But even then it definitely was not the equivalent of like a paid leave or anything else that you would get from other jobs. So in terms of like, is there any equivalent union position for sex workers? So in places like New York, it's really hard to like come up with comprehensive systems for something like that. And the pandemic, I think, really put into perspective the need for certain things like this. That there is no sufficient protection for sex workers. There is no safety net, and the aids that there are available to our community are organized by our community itself, and they exist outside of the actual like economic system, say, of the state. And then even federally, like, it's a little different, but it's like even harder to conceive of something like that in those terms. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Do you see that changing? Like, is that slowly starting to change? Like, do you think that there's a movement happening right now for sex workers?
I think that I don't see it changing yet. I mean, on a state level, I really don't, because of like the brutal policing that we still have to deal with. But and the censorship, even things like on social media.
Yeah.
But I definitely do see the possibility of change. I think even if you look at like historical patterns, something that I've always noticed is that the more people push something and like the more they really like shove it in everyone else's face, like the more viable change eventually is. And I don't want to disregard or look over all of the efforts that a lot of that our community is like having towards like bringing about these reforms and these changes, because they are definitely happening. But they don't register yet. But I think that eventually they will. I mean, they have to, if people actually like work hard enough. And the reason I think that is because people are starting to see more and more and like recognize this line of work as, even if it's not something that, for a lot of people, sex work is not work. Mm-hmm. But even if they do see it even happening, there is a possibility that there may be some shift. Like, even if in like older mindsets there is not, yeah, in like the younger ones there is. Like, I know for a fact, like, I was brought up Catholic, extremely religious, extremely like conservative, and I was brought up in South America, so it was even worse. And now like the possibility for like changes in mentality in like someone like me, for example, these things are definitely there. Like, I have aunts, I have family members who have been sex workers throughout their lives, and no one talks about it, and they don't know that I do what I do. But I definitely do see a change in the way that they were treated when they were younger, and the way that I am being treated now. It's like the community is broader in a sense.
Is it more so like a communal change, or like personal belief changing that's happening right now?
I think that it's a communal change.
Okay.
I think that we're still we're still pretty far from individual changes. What would need to happen in order for these things to like get put on legislation and such, it is there, but sometimes the people that I'm personally surrounded with are all very accepting of like many things, and they are very progressive people. So I forget sometimes when I go into different spheres that people generally don't think like that, or that they are not accepting, or that they bash sex work or other lines of work, not in like the regular, you know, I guess like ideology that's like accepted by people. But so for that reason, I say like it's not really a personal change yet, but I do see the possibility that it will be, and I really hope I'm right about that.
So the other person who's supposed to be on this panel just joined us right now, which is really exciting.
Nice.
Okay. Okay. Cool. I don't know if you want to like introduce yourself and what you do in sex work.
We didn't have any problems.
What?
Hello?
Hi.
Oh, I wasn't sure if anybody could hear me.
I can hear you now.
Okay. What's up, guys?
Okay.
How's it going?
Great. I'm glad you were able to join us. If you just want to like go ahead and like state your stage name and what you do.
Well, right now my stage name is Jayce, and I used to dance at a topless bar. And right now I'm just doing some OnlyFans work. And that's all I've really ever done is some camming before I used to dance, and yeah.
Cool. We were kind of discussing what, sex work was like before COVID hit and what some of the fears you had once COVID started to hit, because honestly, something I've thought about a lot is the change of the environment of sex work, honestly, because if it's a pandemic and we can't really be like super close to each other or like touching, and that's mainly that's mainly what happens. So yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I honestly, it all happened so suddenly. I didn't really have time to like, react really. I just had to stop. But in a way, for me personally, it was kind of a blessing in disguise. Because of that fact that you're coming into contact with so many people and people touch you and they kiss you, you know what I mean? Like they kiss you, your body and stuff, and it's just like very invasive. Mm-hmm. So like I wasn't planning on going back anytime soon. So that's all I was thinking about.
That's good. Yeah. For you, was this your main source of income?
Honestly, no, because I was a bartender as well before this happened. And that was kind of what I was more into doing. But it was really kind of like, I have the privilege of doing it once a week, and that's, just what my situation was at the time. So it was a nice little like side hustle.
Okay. So did you collect unemployment when COVID hit? And were you mainly able to do that because you were bartending?
Actually, no, because I was bartending off the books, but I got unemployment. So I didn't have any pay stubs or anything before this. Everything was off the books. But I did get unemployment because of the PUA, basically just saying that like I was about to start a job when COVID hit, which is true because I now work for the census. And I don't know if that's like kosher to reveal all this information, but I don't really care. But yeah, I worked for the census and I was supposed to start that in March. And then, the pandemic hit, so they had to postpone everything. So that really was my kind of exit plan at the time. It just all happened so much faster than I had intended.
And me and Selena were talking about kind of the changes that are happening, like in sex work, that like unions forming, but also like societal ideals and community ideals and personal beliefs around like the idea of sex work, honestly. And I was wondering any thoughts you had on that.
Oh my God, yeah. I mean, it's a lot. Like, I think it's cool that, you know, the strippers in California are unionizing. I think it's important. But at the same time, I think that it's complicated when it comes to our income because it fluctuates so much. Mm-hmm. And the beauty of it is being able to make, you know, for some people, hundreds of thousands of dollars in one night. But then once you become an employee, that changes everything. So, you know, then you're paying taxes on top of a house fee, which a lot of clubs have. So it's really complicated and it really is a double-edged sword. But I fucking feel for the women and the people, you know, who are out there trying to unionize because it's really easy to be taken advantage of.
So I guess like Selena, you can unmute yourself if you want to, because I want this to be like a kind of conversation that we all have together. And now that we're both now that you've like kind of caught up, I was just wondering, like, what challenges are you facing right now with COVID and continuing sex work?
Is this directed to anybody? Sorry.
Do you want to start, Jayce?
Yeah, sure. I mean, like I said, I mean, my biggest concern would be obviously like sitting next to someone at a bar, in a club, topless or whatever, and then it's just like I don't even want to sit next to anybody. So for me, it's kind of been like a huge sign from the universe to get myself out and really start thinking about just other hustles because, you know, it's always going to be there. I just like, I don't feel safe or comfortable.
And what about
even
you?
If there wasn't a pandemic.
And what about you, Selena?
Well, I definitely see what Jayce is saying, because before that I was thinking about getting another primary source of income for many different reasons for a while, and it was starting to become mentally very hard to do that because you get used to, I guess, the fast money in a sense, and you get used to the flexibility, and the pandemic was it put things into perspective, not having the option to rely on that. However, yeah. I do have to say, as soon as they open back up, I am definitely going back to work, because it's just, especially like all the economic stress, it's like that way. And like that's the thing about it. I personally know a lot of people who go into it and they're like, I'm gonna go into this for like X period of time. And you know, if someone wants to go into that and like stay there, like, you know, cool. But there's other people who that's not their plan. And I've heard people tell me, like, you need to have a plan. Like, if you want to stop doing this eventually, you definitely need to have a plan. Because if you don't, you're just going to keep bouncing back into it. And I have seen it happen. So for me right now, like, I think I have like too many like economic priorities, or like not even priorities, like economic stresses. And I would definitely like return. But I definitely do see the thing that Jayce is saying about the pandemic having been like a very like a wake up thing, kind of like you can find like another way to make it work out now, especially because right now there's no choice for anyone, you know.
Yeah.
At least in New York.
Are either of your jobs opening up soon? Like, have you heard from them?
No, not at all. I haven't heard a word.
No.
Well, okay. What, like, can we talk a bit about your places of work? You don't have to like mention like any names or anything, but like, what was it like? Like, what were the interactions with customers like? What were your relationship with your coworkers, like all that jazz? Selena, you can start.
Sure. We work in the same place actually. I mean, I mostly work day shift, so it doesn't get hectic for me usually. Um, I have definitely had like altercations with customers. It's definitely always a thing, and I had to mentally adapt myself for that. But I do have to say, I mean, personally for me, the place where we work, I think that it's very easy to, in the eyes of management, it's very easy to like tell them if you're uncomfortable with something, or like if someone is like pestering you. I have had people kicked out. So in that sense, like, which is the reason why I have stayed in the like only exclusively in my club where I work now, because I have that. And I do hear a lot of stories from other people who work at other places where that is not the case for them at all. Even some girls who work where we work, you know. So that's, you know, like some bad things definitely, like that happen because men overpass boundaries all the time. I mean, if they do it like catcalling women in the street, like imagine at a club. So
Are you, is there anything you want to add to that, JC?
Yeah, I also only worked at one club, so I don't think I can really speak for like, you know, the kind of, I would never speak for the collective experience, especially me coming from my place of privilege and just honestly doing this as an extra source of income because I can. And my parents aren't here to like tell me no or judge me. But at the same time, it's fucking hard because I felt safer at my club stripping, safer than I've ever felt at any restaurant, any retail store, anywhere else I've ever worked in New York. Mm-hmm. And I only say that because my autonomy was somewhat respected in the sense that, yeah, like what Selena said, you know, I felt like the management had our backs, and that, you know, if something wasn't right or if we weren't enthusiastic about a situation, like there was no have to do anything. But, you know, it's kind of crossing a line where it's, no matter what, it's going to affect your relationships. It's going to affect your friendships. It's going to affect everything else about your life. So I tried as much as possible to keep those lives separate. Like I didn't even like having friends in the club, honestly, except for Selena because I knew her before. And, you know, it's really something that can change the way you look at regular relationships and how you exchange your time and value it. So like, you know, I was buddy with my customers. I had a few regulars, and that's honestly how I made most of my money, like with regulars, not so much random people, because it was very like a cheap place. So, you know, people weren't really coming in there to spend like big bands all the time. That's a lot, but yeah.
Wow. So, for you, JC, so you didn't really have much of a relationship with your coworkers. What did the environment feel like for you? Like, did it feel like a every person for themselves kind of situation, or were people typically close in your work?
Well, people at my place were really close. Like, I could say that a lot of those girls hang out, they're roommates, they have relationships outside of the club, and that's great. But that's also very like niche. Like that doesn't happen everywhere, you know? So I never felt like it was all for themselves. I also felt really supported by everybody, like encouraging the guys to pay us and, you know, like kind of hustling them together in teams. That was always encouraged. And that was kind of like a rule of the club, that, you know, you couldn't you should be uplifting other people instead of like basically stealing from them.
Yeah.
But when it came to like, oh, let's hang out outside of the club, like I can say that I really only did that with Selena because I knew her. And it just, like when I did try that with other people, it just kind of didn't work out the way that I thought it would. So yeah, it's kind of like some people, it works for some people and it just like doesn't for others.
Okay. And what about you, Selena? What was your experience like?
Well, I'm the way that I am as a person. Usually at any job that I have, I'm very quiet and I like usually keep to myself. So that was obviously the experience that I had here. Jayce was the only person that I would really talk to, but definitely the people who, my coworkers were always very supportive, very easy to talk to. Also, like kept to themselves, but not in a way where you would feel like they were closed off. I actually remember my first day working ever, someone came up to me and they were encouraging me and they were telling me that if I had any questions about anything or if I wanted to talk about absolutely anything, that they were available to me, which I feel like is a really nice thing. And since this is the only place that I have worked at, I do have to say I have heard a lot of comments about how this place is kind of unique because of that. I guess like sense of solidarity among the workers there. So I feel very lucky. But
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. And there I have heard stories from other girls who do work at other places, just horror stories about the way that the girls treat each other. And it's like it's a very like dog eat dog mentality, and like you have to like kind of like everyone else is your enemy in the environment. That's what I have heard. I cannot say that from personal experience, but I have heard that so often that I have no doubt about the fact that that is the way that it is in other clubs. Yeah.
My outside environment is not being kind to me right now.
Okay. It's okay. Did you have anything else to say, Selena?
No.
Okay. I kind of wanted to ask those questions because, like, I feel like a lot of people have, like, stereotypes of what it's like to do sex work or misconceptions of, like, what the environment is like. And I was wondering, like, because everything's changing in the way we talk about sex work and the language we use and the way we view sex work. And I was just wondering if there were things that like you wish there was a better language for when talking about sex work.
I mean, to be honest, even the word like sex work kind of makes me cringe sometimes because like I wouldn't even necessarily put myself in that category as like a topless dancer and like an OnlyFans girl, but at the same time I feel like it's the only umbrella term to really include everybody. But I also feel like that's for the people who do the hardcore shit, or like not hardcore but like who actually strip 5 days a week, who actually do that stuff. Like I don't really feel like I'm legit enough in that sense, like if that makes sense. Like I don't find it offensive, I just find like, I don't know if that makes any sense to anybody. Like I'm just a baby in another category.
So would you prefer if like people like when talking about what you do, you just want to be like, oh, I'm a cam girl, or oh, I like work at a topless bar? Like would you prefer that instead of just saying like sex work? Because it is an umbrella term. It is a very big term for a lot of different things that can be considered.
Right. And I almost feel like, I don't have the place to claim that term because of my lack of experience, and my experience in only, like, it's very limited in that field. So like, maybe that's how I'm feeling. I don't really I don't even have a suggestion for another word. I guess, which doesn't really help the problem. But you know, I don't have any problem with the word stripper or anything like that. Oh, my service is kind of being weird.
It's okay. It's all those like weird problems you're gonna come with a Zoom panel meeting, whatever. I think it's really interesting that you say that you don't have a term for it yet, like a term you would even use, because I think it's like now time for us to start creating those terms and creating like the future we want to see in this, I don't know, even to call it an industry. But your thoughts, Selena?
I definitely agree with everything that Jayce said. I do, usually when people ask me what it is I do, I tell them either say I'm a stripper or I'm a dancer. Like depending on who is asking the question, you know, which kind of that speaks to the work that still needs to be done.
Hey, can you just repeat yourself again? I can't really hear you. I'm sorry.
Okay, can you hear me now?
A little bit better. Oh, there we go. I think I can hear you now.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. Usually when people ask me what I do, I either say I'm a stripper or I'm a dancer, depending on who it is I'm talking to, which I think speaks to like the, you know, partly like the work that still needs to be done, you know, all the stigmas. But I definitely agree with everything that Jayce just said about there needs to be more language. I think that the language already exists, even if at a very basic level. But I do think that it's there. It just needs to extend out into like everyone else, and that's like that's what's gonna undo the stigma eventually. But the language is definitely there. People just need to be more willing to use it. And in my experience, people in the industry, quote unquote industry, already use that language, but sometimes it's easier to say, oh, like, yeah, I'm just a sex worker, just to like encompass, because also like there are a lot of things that like go into that. There's a lot of different ways of laboring within that field. I feel like that's why they use the umbrella term, quite honestly. Like, for example, Jayce is a dancer and also a cam girl. I'm only a dancer. I don't cam, I don't do any of those things, but usually it's things that go hand in hand. Or, you know, especially right now in like times of COVID, like that's the pattern I've personally been seeing. I honestly, the reason I haven't started camming myself is because I don't have an environment at the time for economic reasons where I could do that freely, you know, but I definitely would if I had an environment otherwise.
You're so articulate. I couldn't put it into words, but basically, like, I agree about that. Like, there's so much labor and different types of labor. Like, some girls literally just charge for texting, you know, like it could be anything, but like, would they necessarily call themselves a sex worker? I don't know. So it's like, yeah, I wish there was like a more emotional word to it. Like, basically emotional labor is what it is, because you're sitting there wherever you are trying to make someone feel good.
Yeah, no, it is a lot of emotional labor for sure.
I bet. I can't even, like, to be honest, I have thought about like stripping. I have thought about that, and it's actually something I would want to do, but I also think about the emotional labor, and I just don't know if I'm strong enough for that. Like, kudos to y'all, because I don't know. Like, I think sex work is, or stripping or camming or whatever you call it, is a really great and can be liberating thing, and is a great way to get income if that's how you want to get income. And I don't think people should like degrade it at all, but I think a lot of people think it's kind of easy work because they don't think about the emotional labor that goes into it.
I agree. I also think that especially now, like, everyone is just like, oh, I'm gonna make an OnlyFans or whatever, and that's fine. But I really don't think that people are taking into consideration like how this might make or break your life, your relationships, your future. Like it's really not just something you can dip your toe into for fun. And that's what I discovered. And I can honestly say, I don't think I'm cut out for it. Like in the long term, especially because like, it's not really, I'm not a good hustler. Like I'm not even gonna lie. Like I just, some people have that and they have that skill, but it's a really complicated thing to consider. And so some of my friends are like, oh, help me start an OnlyFans. And I'm like, I can't really help you because everybody has their own style. Everybody has their own way of doing things. And you just have to like figure it out for yourself. But it also sucks because there's no like real guide or mentorship in this industry. It's very like, figure it out, you stupid whore. Like, that's how I feel that society, kind of like projects that onto us.
What about you, Selena? Your thoughts? Selena?
You're cutting off. Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Oh, I just wanted to know your thoughts about the whole situation. Well, not situation, but what me and Jayce were talking about.
I think, hold on, I think I'm having internet problems. Okay. No, for sure. I think that it's what's happening right now with everyone wanting to join platforms such as OnlyFans, and I guess like bringing it to the light in that way. It's a very questionable practice. I mean, like the whole Bella Thorne thing that happened, and the way that it affected limitations put on by the website on people who actually depend on this work. That's also like a really bad thing that I see happening. And I think that there is a very fine line um, between bringing the quote unquote sex work industry to the light and like helping it become more accepted by people and helping it like get recognition as actual labor. Because I mean, it's crazily enough, most people like do not think that sex work is work. Like it like baffles me. It really does, but that is the reality. Most people do not recognize sex work as work. But there is a very fine line between bringing recognition, bringing awareness to that, and then deteriorating the field and like meddling with, and I guess like distorting the horizon of opportunities that like sex workers have for them, and like that they have made for themselves for such a long time. Like the OnlyFans example with the whole Bella Thorne thing, like I feel like that's the best example that I can think about. I mean, you have just like all these people. I think what I'm trying to say is there's a very fine line between awareness and romanticization of something. And I really don't want, the direction I see things going in is in that direction of romanticizing sex work. Or like you have
I agree.
In media, like you have all these artists putting in their videos, like, videos of them like stripping, or you have like films coming out about it. And it's just like, it's so shitty, it's really shitty. It takes away the platform from the people who like have been struggling for such a long time to create that platform for themselves. And it's extremely like damaging. And a lot of people think that it does a lot of good, but not all exposure is good exposure. Like if you don't have respect, if you don't do exposure with respect, it's not good exposure. And a lot of people don't understand that.
Yeah, I agree. It is a very, very fine line. Like, and as being someone who is an outsider and not a part of the industry that we're talking about, like, yeah, sometimes when I see film, TV, and music videos like portraying that stuff, I think it's really cool. I think it's really cool, and I think it is bringing awareness. But I didn't think about the fact that like, yeah, that like it is romanticizing this type of work in a way. Like that's the part that's not cool, and it is a very fine line.
I almost feel like that's kind of how I got sucked into thinking, you know, this is going to be great. Like, I've been a dancer since I was 6 years old. Like, what's so bad about getting paid for it? And, you know, you see people like FKA Twigs and, like, I don't know who else is pole dance. Everyone's pole dancing right now. It's like a fucking trend. And that's great. But it becomes a problem when people separate the pole dancing from its history. And although, like, I don't feel like FKA Twigs necessarily did that, she kind of just put herself at the center of that narrative and didn't really like explain why she's doing this until later, until it became a problem. So it's just kind of like, I have so many mixed feelings about it now, because it really is that kind of thing that's like really cool and everybody's interested in it. Everyone's dying to know like the insides and the outsides of the industry and what really goes on and, you know, all these things. But then it's like you're kind of exploiting the secret, like the sacred nature of the work once you start doing that. So it's like, really, I don't know what like society should do moving forward, because I feel like I agree with Selena. Like, yeah, exposure is great when it's tailored in a way that is like protecting people and kind of like, I don't know, like you just have to be careful of the message you're sending.
What are some common misconceptions about sex work that you want to dismantle / debunk? And Jayce, you can go first.
I mean, I guess that like there's a lot. But for me personally, it'd be nice if, you know, I could apply for a job and actually like put my OnlyFans on my resume, for example, because it's like sales skills, you know, there's just so many, there's sales, people skills, interaction, like customer service, HR, like, you know, basically we are everything for ourselves. And I think that's really valid experience, and it shouldn't be like knocked as like, you know, just something to be kept in secret. I also wish that, you know, it wasn't a fact that if I ever wanted to become like, I don't know, a politician or like someone important in society, basically I would either have to like come out and publicly be like, you know, this is who I am, this is what I've done, or keep it and bury it so deep into my closet that, you know, no one ever finds out. And that's just like really unrealistic when it comes to like the internet and privacy. So I guess those are two things that like I personally think about like all the time, and I wish was different.
Yeah. Yeah, I have nothing to say about that. Selena, what do you have to say?
Pretty much in line with what Jayce is saying. I think that a very big thing is the whole like what's gonna happen, what could happen potentially if anyone ever finds out that you were ever in this line of work. Like what could that do to your career if you choose to take that route of lifestyle, or you know, what could that do to your future relationships if they end up finding out? So it's like why not normalize this, because it's just like such a common thing, and it's just a very like tricky thing, you know. And I think more than the stigma around sex work itself, it's like the stigma around most sex workers are perceived as women or are women identified. So I think it's also like it comes from the need, like this manic need to like take ownership over like the female body. Like when I was younger, my mother would talk to me about how I had to be really careful with things such as sexting my partners, for example, because you never know if these things are gonna like come out later on, and like they could ruin your career, and like they have ruined so many people's careers. But it's just why, you know, like why and it centers around like the fact of nudity and around the fact that you're like openly displaying sex, but it's like sex is not the most public thing really that you could like think about, and the most like sex exploited and like a hyper commercialized thing that you can think about, like what is, you know? I feel like everything is so sexual except for sex itself.
Can you expand on that a little bit? Like, what do you mean by everything's so sexual except for sex itself?
When you think about like commerce, for example, or like so when you think about commerce, like the whole idea, like the advertisement industry, like they really profit off of people's bodies, and they profit off of like a lot of the time sexual depictions of people's bodies, you know? Like you don't even have to like look into I don't know, like the like underwear industry for that. Like it could be anything. Like if you're selling a perfume, like you have to put like a naked body next to it, that type of thing. I feel like, so like already sex is such a public thing. Or like when it comes to more cultural matters, it's like it's so normal for little boys or like younger men to have like uh Playboy magazines or like look at porn and like all of these things, and it's, oh yeah, well, you know, that's just boys will be boys, and like that's just something that people do. But like, you know, God forbid someone comes out as like, you know, God forbid you're on the other side of like, I am not the one who's consuming and I am not the man who's consuming, but like I am the one who's providing the labor for that to be consumed, and then like I'm getting ostracized for that, but they're not. They think it's adorable. Like fathers think it's adorable, you know? Oh yeah.
I can see that, yeah.
It sucks, you know? Like it doesn't make any sense. It's not a reasonable thing. I think that's what I mean by sex is already very public, but and I make the point about like female bodies because it's not, female bodies are not allowed to be autonomously public in any sexual sense. That's what I mean.
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
I completely agree. Yeah, because I feel like it's such a problem, you know, if it were to be like a woman who's running for office, for example, comes out and says that, you know, she used to be a stripper, you know, even Cardi still can't, you know, people can't even accept that. They still hold it against her is what I'm saying. And then if it were to be like, you know, a man coming out with like a dick pic like Chris Evans the other day, it's celebrated, and it's like everyone's so curious about it, and everyone's like, oh my God, I want to see Chris Evans' dick. Like, it's not like, oh, he's a whore, he's a slut, he did it on purpose. There's no alternate narrative for that. It just is accepted.
Yeah, it's very interesting that you bring up like Chris Evans and like like, no, this is the truth of it though, because like I heard about Chris Evans thing and I literally was like, I don't give a fuck, and I like passed by it. But when I heard Cardi was like a stripper, it was like, oh, that's so cool. Like it intrigued me more, and it like, I don't know, it was more like not like a conversation debating anything about it, but just like more like, oh my God, did you guys hear that like Cardi was a stripper? Like she was a stripper, and she like, you know, it is quite interesting what we find more intriguing, I think. I don't have anything.
I know it's not as accepted.
Yeah. So I think you're muted, JC.
Oh shoot. Yes, I was.
Were you saying anything?
No, I was confused. I got a little lost in my own thoughts. But basically, no, I completely agree. Like, it's, you know, when a guy is forward about his sexuality, you know, it's just different. It's like portrayed differently by the media. It has a different like purpose to it. And for some reason, like, there's always that element of like, oh, she wants attention, that's why she's doing this too, where like I don't think men get the same like rap for that, or like, I don't know. I'm trying to connect my ideas to what Selena was saying, because it was a really good like point about like the consumer and the person who's making the content, and the stigma between like those two dynamics.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of more, I guess, representation and like consumer content for female identifying or female bodies, like, or what's perceived as a female body, than there is for male identified or male perceived bodies. And I wonder, do you guys think that will ever change? Do you think that we're on like sort of a movement to change that? Anyone can go.
I don't think we're on a movement to change that.
No,
I really don't. I mean, I hope there is. You know, I really hope there is, and like there still needs to be a lot of work done. But like as I mentioned before, you know, like all the people that I surround myself with are all very progressive people in that sense, and they have a certain mentality, and they belong to that kind of idealistic thinking, and they apply all of these things to their day-to-day life. But as soon as I enter nearly any other sphere, any other social sphere different than my own, it's like it's like a slap in the face. It's a huge slap in the face that people don't normalize these things, that people still have all of these stigmas. Just to add on one last thing to that conversation that we were just having, like I was just thinking the other day about the whole thing that's going on with Pornhub, for example, and that in contrast with OnlyFans. So it's like, well, you know, if you don't want to support Pornhub anymore, or if you can't access Pornhub the way that you could before, there's other viable options such as OnlyFans. And you have all of these, like, mostly men, but I mean, sadly also like women that like are just completely bashing. Never, but it's like, you know, you had like a huge corporation that like abused, like physically and mentally abused like so many bodies for like such a long time, and you don't really like have anything against them. But then the moment that a woman wants to take, or like any like body wants to take into their own hands their own labor and like all the fruits of their labor within this industry, you want to bash them. So that really doesn't make sense to me, because shouldn't it be the other way around?
What are ways that like someone who doesn't do sex work or in the industry or does any of the things that you guys do, what are ways that we can change the narrative, like help change it, do you believe?
I think there needs to be more like women and, you know, non-binary people who are like pro any type of sex work, like just pro ho, as I like to call it. Like basically, and you know, it comes from a place of like condemning their own sexuality. And I just wish that there was more of a female presence in the customer sphere of the strip club. Like I wish there was more support from other women, and not like this hierarchy of like, oh, I can do all those things, but I have morals, which I've heard from so many people, and it's bullshit, because it's obviously that has nothing to do with it. You could be a Catholic and still do whatever on the side. Like it doesn't matter. Anyway, that was kind of a weird illusion. But my point is that, like, yeah, I wish there was more of that, like, collective, like, support.
And what about you, Selena?
I think that a big part of it is just like incorporating all of these like, I guess, progressive ideas into like your everyday conversations, you know. Because I think a lot of stigma, most of the stigmas that we live in our day-to-day expressions, and like in the regular conversations that we have with absolutely anyone. So it's just such a common thing, you know, for when like bashing happens against certain communities. Some people don't even know that they're doing it. Like that's what's so hard about it. It's like so ingrained. A lot of people don't even know that they're doing it, and that's just a way of perpetuating damaging cycles. And so I think if you ever are having a conversation with anyone and like you hear anyone say anything that's like, I don't know, out of tone, or just like it's misinformed, or it comes from like the wrong perspective, you could, you know, correct that person. I think that's like the baseline. And then, you know, try to get involved in things like what's happening, you know, like for example in the world of politics in relation to sex work. Just, you know, get informed about that, because, you know, if we there's just so much censorship around it that you do have to do your own digging, but it's there. You know, I definitely can tell you for a fact, people are trying to do the work. People are holding rallies for things like this. But you do have to do your own research, because you're not going to turn on New York One News and they're going to be talking about it. At least not anytime soon. So, you know, the part of that part of the work is, I like to say that it's extremely individual, because of the nature of it, and you're just not going to have it in we're already like so hyper stimulated by so much information coming at us, but that exists outside of that. So I feel like we tend to forget about certain communities and about certain things like this one, because the general media doesn't mention it. So just individual research is it's out there. It really is very necessary.
I agree. So one of the reasons I wanted to have this small panel is to also talk about like just stripping, cam work, sex work in general, and like to, you know, like hear from actual people who do this work, like what's going on and what other people can do to help. And so I was wondering, like, what are some, like, during this pandemic, like, how are you and maybe some of your coworkers, if you stayed in touch, like, how are you guys adapting to this? Is virtual sex work becoming more popular? Is that, I know you already talked about doing CAM, Jayce. So yeah, that's basically it.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much the only option. Everyone has, you know, some people are still working in other states in person. Some people are who have never been online, who never had an online presence like me, created one. Well, I had one a little bit, but not the same, you know, under the same like guise or whatever. So yeah, it's just kind of like there really is the only option. I don't, what I, you know, find most difficult is the girls or the people who, you know, can't even qualify for unemployment, and something like, you know, an online platform is like their only option. So personally, I've just like been getting through it by kind of accepting the fact that I have no idea if and when that'll ever be a thing or an option for me. And I just have to move on and kind of like find other ways of, you know, still kind of expressing myself in that way. But it really is hard. Like, obviously you're not going to make, like, what I was making in a night was like 500-600 maybe max. Yeah, I'm not going to make that in a day on OnlyFans. Like, maybe if I was Bella Thorne or whatever, but it's just not the same at all. And another thing is because I'm not out. Like, my parents don't know, like my family doesn't really know. So I'm not posting about it on my main Instagram. my other Instagram only has like 80 followers. So it's just like, it's really hard to start from scratch because you feel like you're a nobody. Like, it's rough.
Yeah. And what about you, Selena?
Well, definitely the virtual platform for it is getting really big. I have noticed, as I mentioned before, like especially at the beginning of this whole COVID thing, and like it really exploded because it's a very useful thing for people to be doing right now. And I get really worried, as Jayce said, I get really worried about the people who do not qualify for unemployment. I was working this was technically a part-time for me. I was working part-time during like school time. And because of my other part-time, I qualified for unemployment. So, that's like, thankfully not my case, but I am thinking a lot about all the people who that is not the case for them, and also like to the people who are still out there hustling, like in the streets, like it's really, it's very hard in like in a line of work like this to like be able to provide yourself protection against everything that's going on, because it's like a very physical thing. So, and then the fact that there is no public aid, or just, at least not like widespread. Things such as like clinics, or things for these people who are like a lot more exposed than like someone, for example, working at a restaurant or like at a retail store right now. They get to wear their masks, but like a lot of people like in this line of work, they're not doing that right now. Like they can't, it's just, it's nearly impossible to protect yourself because it's so physical. And there is not enough aid out there. There is aid, and there are a lot of people doing a lot of work towards that, but because of like all of the stigmas, it doesn't receive all the attention and like all the possibilities of good beneficial exposure, so if like anyone who like has OnlyFans, or like support them if you can, or like if there are any like fundraisers. There's a lot of like really, like the really cool thing that I like about Instagram a lot is that it's a very good platform for like fundraising stuff, like organizations, even if like on a very small scale, because they don't have to pay for like public domains or any of those things. There's a lot of stuff out there. So if you really want to like support and you have the means to, I strongly encourage you so that you can support the people doing the work for sex workers, because there are people out there, thankfully.
You already answered our very last question, but Jayce, what are some ways we can support sex workers during this time that you know of?
Yeah, I mean, basically give them money, pay them, Cash App, Venmo. Like, there's no other like better thing than to support sex workers financially, because that's really what it's all about. And also, like, don't be a performative ally. Don't be fake. Don't live in a bubble. Like, just talk to people, fucking subscribe to your friends' OnlyFans. You don't have to look at it. Just subscribe. If you're not comfortable with that kind of stuff, it like literally every fan helps. So it's like little things like that. And just checking in with your, your friends who do this kind of stuff. And for me, it's mostly like, I wish that the older generations would kind of like stop with the performative allyship, because it's like people who claim, that they've been supporting sex workers for years, but, if it was their daughter or someone they know, they changed their minds. So even the emotional support like that, is something that I really think is just as important as the financial aspect of it sometimes.
Nice. That kind of That's kind of all the questions on the panel. I was wondering if you guys had anything else you wanted to say or talk about.
I kind of had one more thing to add, just like in terms of like another obstacle that, you know, COVID is like presenting is the loss of like anonymity for me. Like, you know, online everybody wants to see your face, and you don't have to, but it's a lot different than being able to go into a space where there's no cameras allowed and people don't know your real name. They can't look you up on the internet unless you give them the access. And it's kind of cool to be able to like not have to worry about like, oh, this is going to be copied or it's going to be posted somewhere else that, you know, maybe someone else is making money off of. It's like all in person. That was like the beauty of the, you know, all in person work. So I definitely struggle with like the you know, anonymity aspect of that. Yeah. But yeah, that's kind of like just a little sidebar.
What about you, Selena?
No, I totally see that. I totally see that. That's also one of the reasons why I haven't gotten into scamming. It's just there's a lot of anxiety surrounding that, you know, I feel like for a lot of people, and a lot of people have not really had the option, you know, to not do that, I guess. So I definitely see that. I mean, going online means sometimes not really having ownership over your own body, and it becomes like a sphere of politics. Like usually sometimes even at the club you would feel somehow like you don't have full autonomy over your body because of the things that inevitably go on, I suppose. But this is like just a whole new thing.
Well,
right. Yeah.
Well, thank you guys so much for agreeing to do this and taking time out of your day to talk about all this stuff. And yeah, it was great.
Thanks, Maya. You're so sweet. It was fun.
I'm glad.